Hello, everyone. So this is the morning after the night before, where or when I gave a workshop, if you can call it that, on writing funding applications for the Arts Council in particular, and specifically in relation to visual art, but which covers a lot of cultural spaces, such as music, theatre, whatever. And I wanted to do this reflection on that really for those people who attended, which over 20 attended, and for those that couldn't make it. And I just wanted to really break down some of the things I was presenting, the realities of arts funding, and how it's changed in the last 2 decades, in which I have been applying as an artist and as a critic. So my roles have shifted, and this is very much part of my philosophy around being an artist in the world. It involves shapeshifting and production and overproducing, really. So if you're not a shapeshifter and if you're not a producer, it's very hard to create the networks needed, the visibility needed, to acquire or be successful in applications for funding. And this has grown and grown in a sense in the last decade, especially, where networks have changed among artists in relation to social media, etc. So there's always network building going on Instagram. And I can't say elsewhere, because I don't think Facebook is a thing anymore. Twitter is certainly not for artists. So Instagram is the central space in which there's a networking. And one of my points last night was that we have accepted that our art has become a kind of a simulacrum, as a digital image. And that's how we transmit our work into the world now. It's not in galleries. It's not in the public square, or maybe it is. Probably it's more in the public square as public art. But really, domesticated artworks that sit in rooms are now transmitted through digitally, through our phones, through the laptop here. And we've accepted that. And the same goes for funding. That the people who are judging your work, your peers, your seniors, your peers with a little bit more agency because they've been selected for these panels and they have successfully acquired funding before. That's usually the case with the panelists. So they are looking at your work as a digital image. And this happens with all institutions now, even in education. So only 5 years ago, I was preparing portfolios, maybe a little bit longer, before COVID, actually. So 6, 7 years ago. One of my jobs in the PLC course that I teach was to prepare portfolios, and they were physical things. And then post-COVID, it became all digitized, and now in our colleges, etc., the way they judge work now is through a digital slideshow of images of work, not the physical thing anymore. And the same goes for funding, and the same goes for social media. How we appreciate art is as a digital image. So the same goes for funding, and that's why I'm trying to be more specific in relation to this, that your digital images, your photography of your own work has to be very much a priority. So the basic stance I had last night is that all the paperwork, including your support material, which is the images of your work, has to be perfect. The links can't be broken to videos or other things. This, even though it won't register consciously on the person that's marking your work, because it is a numbers game, all these errors in your application will add up, unconsciously or not, in the mind of the person judging your work, assessing your work, let's say. And if you don't have everything in place, if you haven't tested it, these are the first things you should be doing. And also the quality of your images, the dynamism of your images, and the precision in which you are articulating and convincing the person assessing your work. There has to be a measure of confidence. And it can't be just re-describing of the guidelines. So, of course, in this, let's start with the summary. The summary is like the summary of your proposal is a shorthand for your detailed proposal. And it involves something like, it's 50 words, it's 100 characters or something like that. So it's very short. And a lot of people approach this in a 3-point format. So they have 3 points in their proposal. They're going to buy time for whatever reason. They're going to explore this for whatever reason, with these kind of outcomes in mind. So that's the third reason. So, but these can be juggled in different ways. But you're trying to drill home or drive home your point very quickly, very efficiently, and very precisely. Now, if you just say, I want to buy time, everyone else is saying that. Or you're returning to your art practice after a time out, whether you've had children, whether your life circumstances have changed, etc. Something got in the way, some life world thing got in the way of your practice, and you're returning to work or returning to making work. This is a kind of cliche of the bursary award application. So one of my main points also last night was that people sometimes get confused with the bursary award. They confuse the bursary award with the project award. The bursary award is not about production, even though you're judged based on your production beforehand. Okay, so being an artist in the world, as I've said, is about being a producer. And a producer of a kind of obsessive quality that you've been producing over a long period of time. I've been producing as an artist for 2 decades or more. If I count my art education, it's 25 years more. So, and over that time, I've created a back catalogue of production. And I've had life world events take place during those over 2 decades. I've had children, which is a big thing for artists. When they get to a particular point, I wouldn't say career, but in their making. When they have children, everything shifts massively. Time isn't there, attention isn't there. The whole psychology of how you looked at the world before and after children just shifts dramatically. And so this is one of the reasons why some artists apply for the bursary, that they're returning after having children. Or it doesn't have to be about children. It can be other things. But what I would say is that I've lost my track of thought there, but what I'm getting at is that this idea of production, it's central to being an artist. We are both consumers and producers, and this has never been more pertinent or significant in the qualifying or quantifying what an artist does, especially in relation to funding. And when you're producing and when you're on a trajectory, and even if you get derailed in that trajectory and you're changing tact and changing technique and changing your ideas about your art practice, these are all things you should be aware of, especially when you're articulating your work to the Arts Council. Because for the bursary versus the project award is about production. It's about producing something towards something, whether you have a solo show coming up, whether you're working with lots of different artists in the making of an event. But it's very much about production, and it's very much about having all that stuff in place, especially institutional support. The word institution came up repeatedly yesterday, and it's central to Arts Council funding. Your relationship with institutions, whether private or public institutions, is central. The institution of the curator is central also. So what I would say is that you have to think about institutions when you're thinking about applying for funding. You have to think about all these agents, these actors that are institutionalized, not institutionalized, but they're institutional. They're institutionalized also because their relationship with the institution. But the artist relationship with the institution is very different to the curator's relationship with the institution. The curator speaks in institutional verbs, nouns. They understand the institution, whereas the artist doesn't. And the curator is a kind of middle person in the relationship between the artist and the institution. They're a kind of filter. And what I've found over the years, even teaching or facilitating correspondence courses, is that the artist has really lost their ability to self-organize. So they look towards these agents, these actors, as ways of talking to the institution without them speaking themselves or without them organizing themselves. So your relationship with institutions, including people, is central. And what you see in bursary awards now is that you have a whole network that is outlined in the application for those who are successful in funding. And that could be, or that is in recent years, the mentor. So if you say just say in the summary or the detailed proposal that you are, or you want to take time off, or you want to buy time, these cliched institutional responses, to reflect on your practice after a time of outcome-based deadlines. So let's say exhibitions or production. If you're doing that alone, that isn't going to be looked upon favorably. But if you invite in a mentor, and I spoke about this last night, a mentor that is not just a mentor that represents a kind of a representation or a reputational, what would I say? A reputational rung above you on the ladder to success. So you're working with an artist that is more established than you. That's not enough. The artist you're working with has to relate in some way in what they're doing to your concerns as an artist. So just say you're a painter and you want to work with another painter that you look up to, and you see what they're doing as influential, but also challenging to the way you look at your painting. Now, the looking at your own painting, and I'm using painting just as a general medium. It could be sculpture, it could be film, it could be photography, whatever it is, that you have to be more precise in terms of who you're looking to have mentoring from and how you will benefit from that mentoring. It can't be just arbitrary, just because this other artist that you're looking for mentoring from has a certain reputation. That's not enough. So there has to be more awareness overall in how an artist looks at their work in relation to the world. Now, I made a point last night, and it probably was a little bit of an absurd point, but I kind of believe in it, that artists can't see their own work. And they need others to see it objectively because they're caught up not just in the temporal process of making a work. They're inside it. They're inside the subjectivity of the work and themselves. But also emotionally, they can't see it in some ways. And they're always reaching out to others to see it for them. And that's where the curator comes in as well, this kind of objectivity that the artist doesn't have around their own work. There's always this kind of displacement, subjective displacement when an artist is looking at their own work. It's an amazing act, art making in a way, especially when an artist goes public, that they're presenting this thing they can't see. And there's always a kind of vulnerability around that. But weirdly, in the application form, you have to be more convincing. You have to be more precise. You can't be vague. I'm buying time. I'm returning to making art after a period out. Every artist is saying that. Why are you buying time? Why are you taking this direction? Which has to be a little bit more precise, and you have to have done some of the groundwork already, whether that is research, visual or textual, whatever it is. You have to present that back and be convincing in terms of how this is going to help you as an artist into the future. Once again, emphasizing that the bursary is not about materials, because there's only a percentage that you can use to buy materials. It's mainly about a fee to the artist to buy time, to return to work or explore a new avenue of research or approach. It's not about sustainability or sustaining a practice that has already been established. It's really about breaking up that practice maybe and exploring different things. Or after a period of deadline-driven work, as we all feel, even at the end of an exhibition, we kind of reach the edge of the cliff, as one artist said to me recently at an opening. And you're looking for a new approach afterwards in some ways. And this is where the shape-shifting comes in. And this is what is valued in the art scene. This is how I've sustained an art practice over 2 decades. It's the shape-shifting. It's also the networking. And I don't mean networking in a business way. I mean connecting with other artists, collaborating, reaching out, doing residencies, being in the world, which is something a lot of artists hate because a lot of them are introverted. So these social spaces, whether the opening, not just in your local town or in Dublin, but in Belfast, in Galway. I know artists that do so much groundwork. Those successful artists in applications, they do so much groundwork. They're traveling all the time. They're working the art scene. And they're making connections. They're having conversations. They're generous in terms of their view of other artists. They're aware of other artists. They're interconnected with the art scene. Um, they're doing lots of things all at once. When I started out as an artist, I was very productive. I was very ambitious. I did absurd things to get visibility, to get opportunity. I turned down things to gain other things. I was very precise in terms of what I wanted to do. I did an MFA, which gave me that license, that confidence to do what I was doing. And I had a really good run of it up to up to us having a kid. And then I had to change tact and I went into art criticism more fully. But then I had to really change my approach, especially in relation to funding. And the bursary for a long time didn't suit my profile as an artist. So I had to start applying to the project award, which is a much heavier, more paperwork, more collaboration, more framework, more ideas. And that was my comfortable space though, because it fit my profile, because I wasn't an artist in the studio just doing my individual thing. I was always working with other artists in the production of work. And that looked really favorable in terms of panels for project funding. Set up different entities like Small Night Projects and Small Night Zine. This is my studio here. There's production happening here. There's always production happening. It's called Small Night because when I had small children, they're a little bit older now. They're just got into teenage years, or one of them has. I used to work into the small night hours before work. I know other artists that get up at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning before they have to drop the kids to school. That's their space. So you're always carving out spaces for production and you're always reaching out. Mentoring is a kind of process that is a type of reaching out, but it is not always successful. But you're always creating networks. So you have to be a social being. None of us are. So you're forced into this position to do this, especially in relation to funding. So that's why you see year on year certain artists getting funding year on year. Now, I brought this up as well, and I really want to make a point of this, that in a way, it's unfair if one artist gets funded twice or 3 times, let's say, when you think about the amount of artists that are applying. But weirdly, there has become a dependency and an entitlement around funding, that every artist feels they're deserving because of the work, especially if you're an obsessive, the work you put into your practice. You're not counting the hours. You never do that. That would be masochistic. But you are thinking about the years that you put into this. And when you send out this paperwork with images of your work, you kind of expect something back. You want payment. You feel you deserve it. And then when you see certain artists year on year getting funding, that creates a kind of an envy, a sense of unfairness, and I would say anger. It was brought up last night by one of the audience members that the basic income for the arts has created this kind of sense of a funding space for artists, which was never there before, or the possibility or the promise of it, which is ridiculous in a way because it's a lottery. And it's not based fully on your disruptive career as an artist. But it has built up this promise or this hope that one day you will get funded for a few years. And this also goes for the bursary award and the project award, which is a step up. The project award really is a step up because the agility award is gone, which was a kind of, let's call it a symptom of COVID. Now more and more people are applying for the bursary. And I learned last night that if you receive the agility once, you can't get it again. But I don't know if it even exists anymore. I don't think it does. You can correct me on that. It doesn't matter. The influx of artists applying now, with the help of AI, which has leveled the playing field, it's untenable. And it's going to create a kind of a space, even though there's a good bit of funding out there compared to other countries when you think about the US. It's created a dependency on those artists that get it year on year, whether they alternate between bursary and project, which is a real feat. It's a real achievement. But there's nothing in the policy that says when you get into the bursary and the project award that you can't get funded year on year. If you're, and I don't know how this is judged, and because each panel is different, this is just one of those things. It's one of the variables, the many variables that take place when you're applying for funding. You should know that in the beginning of the process, there's one gatekeeper that looks at your work remotely. They look at your application in a detailed way. I've done this for a few years. A good few years ago, I did it. And each remote gatekeeper has a certain amount of applications to look at over a period of time. And there's a lot of time is given to those. And then they write a kind of review of what that is. And they actually decide if you go into the panel situation. Now, that's probably become more rigorous and more, what I would say, brutal in that because there's so many people applying for the bursary now, there's going to have to be more artists cut because a panel can't deal with that many applicants. Because each panelist has to read through, I don't know, 40, 50 applicants in the shortlist, if not more. I kind of forget what it was, but it was a lot. So all these things are playing out in the process. There's also the subjectivities of the panelists and the gatekeeper. So, and I brought this up last night as well, medium specificity. So just say one of the gatekeepers is a painter, and there's a painter they're looking at a painter in the application process because it's kind of randomized in a weird way. That could look favorable to the painter because another painter is looking at their work. The same with the panel. If there's a painter in the panel and a painter comes into the discussion. But also it can be a problem because medium specificity means that painter judging another painter, there's an element of critique that may not be there with one of the other panelists. Because painters are very much aware. And also they look at other paintings through their own paintings. This is the case with all medium specificity. Filmmakers look at their other films through their own films. So at a certain point in their development, this is what happens. And there's a kind of competitiveness as well. So medium specificity can go different ways. There could be someone on the panel who's interested in photography and they've no interest in painting, and they don't even know how to look at the work. That creates a problem because they can't judge it. I was in a panel before, and one of the panelists admitted that, God, thank God there's a painter on the panel, because I haven't got a clue about this. So, but these are the variables that play out. What I would say is my experience of being on a panel was, I thought it was a brilliant process. I thought it had lots of compromises, but they were part of the process. They had to be, because of the amount, the capacity that those panelists have to contain in themselves to articulate a judgment on another artist that is their peer. And I do question, this idea of medium specificity, that maybe there could be a way of juggling the panel in relation to medium, but I don't know what that is, and it would take a big conversation to figure that out. But those compromises are for everyone. I'm not sure what is the magic of those artists that get funded year on year. Listen, I'm one of those artists that has, let's say, been funded unfairly, because I've received funding more than a lot of people and less than a lot of people. There's been big gaps in my funding. When I first started applying for funding 20 odd years ago, it took me 5 years to get €500 as part of a bursary. Now those bursaries and those project awards have been inflated. The project award has nearly went on steroids, because there's one award that is just too big for an individual artist. And I think there's a problem there in terms of the amount of money that's being thrown out on an individual artist. But, increases in living expenses, rent, all these things contribute to this inflation of funding, and there's no way of getting away with it. So anyway, so the funding process is based on lots of things, lots of criteria. But what I would say is that if you're precise in, let's say, the bursary award rather than the project award, because the project award is a different animal. It is about production. I think it's definitely more suited to artists that perhaps have got the bursary before and they've established a practice, whatever that means, but they've established a network of individuals that they can work with, and they've established a way of thinking and an awareness of their own practice in relation to the world, the local context in which they are, and the international world in some cases, that it makes more sense. So the bursary is a different animal. It will, of course, have become more competitive in recent years because of the Agility Award being jettisoned, or whatever it is. So, or if it has, so I haven't looked this up because I've never applied for the Agility Award. The timing of it wasn't, didn't align with my practice. So yeah, criteria, track record. The summary. The summary is something that has to be precise, specific, in relation to what you're going to explore. It can't be vague. It can have all the terms: buying time, returning to art after a period of deadline-driven work, or a period of inactivity for whatever reason. All those things, okay, they're all cliches, but there has to be meaning And then that meaning has to relate or has to be transposed onto your presentation of your work. And that presentation is central. As I started this recap, your images have to be really good. So if the artist can't see, let's take the belief that an artist can't see their own work. What does that mean? Well, you have to get a photographer to look at it or a fellow artist to take photographs of it. You need to get someone outside of you to document your work. This may involve paying a photographer to do it, someone you can trust, who understands that you need photography documentation that really presents your work in the best light. So we were kind of going through this, and just say you're a painter and you have your painting on the wall. The worst thing you could do is crop. When you take a photograph, that you crop the edges off. So you make it cleaner, because that makes the painting flatter when you crop off those edges. Edges are so important to a painting. And I think frames are a problem as well. So I've seen some applications where there's frames and glass even, very, not museum glass either, like glass that reflects the room around them. Like there's immediately you're put out of the shortlist. You won't even get through the gatekeeper with that kind of imagery. So what I'm saying is the paperwork and the support material documentation has to be perfect. Links working, etc. And then, and even looking at your grammar, if you have grammatical errors, especially in the summary or in those short pieces, they're going to chip away at your application, the success of your application. But in a way, AI has leveled the playing field in respect to this. But what AI can't do, it can do this kind of form making really well, better than humans. It can also diagnose why your application isn't working. Now, you have to take this with a pinch of salt, because what I would say about that, it doesn't really, if you haven't prompted it in a way that it understands your context, I think that can be a problem, and it can give you the wrong diagnosis. So as part of this suite of workshops that we developed in support of the Wexford Arts Office, there was a workshop on how to photograph your artwork. There was also a workshop that I held on writing on your art practice. And it talked about this idea of awareness being central to understanding your work and the context in which it sits in. And a lot of artists aren't aware of their own work in relation to the world around them. They're not fully aware of other artists out there. So I think you really should be. I think you should be going to see other exhibitions as much as you can. That's what I did as an artist emerging. I went to everything. I had an agenda. I was also a critic at the time. So I went to exhibitions to produce words, which was also a process, or it lent itself to a creation of another network, a critical network that pushed me up in terms of visibility. And I also took a stance that was critical, which no one else was doing at the time, or some people were, when there was a kind of an extinction burst of a crisis of criticism. And then that kind of leveled out. But I continued to be a critic and asking questions, especially with the use of the word why. And so I've used all these things to create a network. And that's what you have to do as an artist. You have to create networks, you have to create connections, you have to ask advice from other artists, you have to make friends, you have to have a bit of luck. Um, you have to get through that one gatekeeper that may not understand your work or does, and you just haven't articulated it properly. Um, One thing was brought up last night about feedback. You should always get feedback. That's really important. And I think that even, and someone brought up that you should get feedback even if you're successful. Like, what was it about your application that was successful? Um, I think that's it. Like, we're really lucky to have funding. Um, Even though in the bursary award, it's mainly artist fee, we know as artists we're going to spend everything on being an artist. And because this is what we have to do, we have to produce. There's an obsession to produce. That's why I set up this studio in my house in a garage, because I knew if I produce and I connected with artists, I could continue the thing I'm doing because I have a need to do it and I have a want to do it. And there's really brilliant artists out there that are not getting funding because they don't understand, or they're not reaching out enough. Now, like, I would, the cliche of the mentor, I think you shouldn't hang your hopes on that. Um, all artists are looking for mentors. In the last year, I've been contacted probably 15 times to be a mentor. This has never happened before. So this shows a shift in the perception around funding. Now, all this funding, all this mentoring is based around getting funding. And a lot of times I don't hear a word back. Now, maybe they got funding and they've, said, oh, forget about it. I don't want to pay anyone to be, that's just extra. So, but I think that you shouldn't hang your hopes on mentoring. I think you should reach out. In some cases, we have to change who we are. We have to shapeshift. And this, I'm going to end on this. Shapeshifting is very much part of being an artist. I've taken on so many roles as an artist. I began as an artist, then I went into art criticism, then I went into curation, alongside teaching. I've to become a teacher, I did a HDip. I took out 2 years from making work, which was torturous, but I knew after having a kid, I had to get a job. Um, and these are the realities of being an artist. You have to shapeshift. You have to extend yourself. You can't just depend on Instagram. I left Instagram even though I thought it was bad for my mental health. But also, like, listen, I actually didn't affect my mental health that much, but it affected my appreciation of art and artists, because I saw, look, as an objective viewer that has nothing in the game really in terms of, I'm not looking for exhibitions or residencies or anything like that. I'm just working with artists out of the shed. But what I found is it just dampened my appreciation of art or my appetite to go see shows. So when I got off there, my appetite grew immediately. And now I'm on Substack, which I don't really look at other than posting. It's not one of those things that is seductive in the way Instagram is. It's kind of boring. But it's a it's a good place. It's a better place for my writing, because I was always changing my writing to fit Instagram, which worked sometimes. It worked really well at times, especially if I was doing short pieces. I could just input them into um, the caption. But Substack has more flexibility in terms of, these videos and just writing and, the dissemination of my writing and opinion and stuff like that. So find a space that suits your work. Um, find other people. If you're a painter, meet up with other painters. Not just through this officialdom of mentoring. Just reach out, have a chat, go for a coffee, propose things. Artists have to self-organize. They cannot depend on curators. They cannot depend on institutions. They have to do the groundwork first, and that usually involves a lot of DIY and sacrifice. I wrote a piece over a decade ago, and it outlined how much I had spent being an artist in the first 4 years of being an artist after college, after my MFA at NCAD. And even though I was on the dole, I spent around 10,000 being an artist from 2008 to 2012 when we had our first child. And I was getting paid nothing. I had 9 solo shows. I did a year-long residency at Red Stables. I had several group shows. I was writing as a critic for free on blogs. I had enough to survive and to buy materials, but nothing else. It was really a drought, but it was probably one of the most exciting periods of my production. And I found ways to make work and recycle work. And my practice just suited the moment. It suited that moment of the financial crisis, the vacancies in spaces, the artist-run movements. It fit into that context. And yeah, so you have to look at your work and is it fitting the context? Now, you could say that there's too much painting today. And I think that's true. And I think that there's something shifting with respect to the popularity of painting as a practice. There's no real critique anymore. There's no questioning. There's no discourse, really. I don't know if there's even any discourse in art schools anymore. Not the way it was when I was in college. But we have to accept those shifts. So what I would say is that you have to create your own discourse. You have to figure out what the art scene is today, why certain artists are getting a purchase on the art scene, why are they getting successive funding year on year, and what is it they're doing that you're not doing. I know a lot of those artists that get funding, they work to get that funding. It's not just handed out. And we all have to sacrifice for this thing we call art. And so, yeah, I think the best thing for artists is to self-organize and to reach out to other artists and create a kind of a center of power that isn't involved with middle persons that connect you with institutions. Of course, you're going to need them in the end because they're the administrators of the art scene. They're the gatekeepers. But you have to start somewhere. If you have no perch to begin on or no stepping stone, you have to create that yourself. My perch at the beginning was creating a free blog. It was the time of blogging, art blogging. It was the time of a crisis and criticism. But when I set up that blog, that really helped me to create a kind of purchase that I performed. I performed for my audience. I realized I was gaining a big readership at the time in 2010 or 11. So you have to create your own purchases. You have to create your own stepping stones. And then when they're like across the pond, when they start to kind of emerge from under the surface, um, then you start to make impacts, visibility, attention that may garner the attention of those who are middle persons or are in a more powerful position in terms of the relationship with institutions. But you do have to shapeshift, and you have to create other ways of making. I never knew I was going to be screen printing in a shed in Waterford. Printmaking was an anathema to me in art college because I was a painter, and print seemed the opposite of that. It's order, it's detachment, it's machinery, it's mechanical. Whereas in painting, it's subjectivity, it's mess. I'm actually now thinking about returning to painting in a small way, in a secret way. I've been talking with another painter about the possibility, but it's a really difficult thing because I've given up for like, I don't know how long it is now, but it's 15 years, I think, maybe less. But yeah, I'm always thinking about shape shifting, and because that's what the environment has conditioned in me. I know I have to shapeshift. I know for me, I have to read things that will help my criticism. And yeah, I'm just, yeah, I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to have to use the recording from the Zoom recording because I think this died a death while doing that, but it doesn't matter. I hope this helped those who attended last night and those who didn't, and those other people who had no intention of attending. I know someone at the end said, I feel traumatized after that 2-hour presentation, but really I'm just talking about the realities of the process of funding. And I can't say it's a lottery, but I can say that it is kind of a lottery, but you can convince a panelist if you go about it the right way. You use the right language and you present yourself, you transmit your practice in the right way. So that means dynamic, objective documentation. And if you have all those in place and everything is good and proper, then there's a possibility you will. But then you have, once again, the panelists and the subjectivities therein. People can talk about conflicts of interest, but that's a myth. Of course, there's practical or visible conflicts of interests. Like, just say, everyone knows each other in the art scene, especially if you have been a networker. And so it's quite lenient in that sense. But there's other conflicts of interests, and they include biases toward a certain medium, like medium specificity. Uh, Maybe a kind of envy with respect to more established artists or artists on the rise. These are all unconscious drives and motivations behind our judgments, because we are all so visible as artists, whether on Instagram or elsewhere. I'm visible now. Everyone's going to have an opinion about the person and the work and how they're transmitting the message of their work, etc., how they're going about being an artist in the world. These are all in plain sight now. So there's no enigma, really, especially if you're connected with the art scene, whether digitally through social media or with the art scene proper in the gallery spaces, through the press releases. There's all this information out there, and everyone takes this differently, this information. So there's always unconscious biases going on. And that will kind of condition how you are marked. And I want to end with numbers. You are marked between 3, 5, 8, and 10 on an application. And if you're not getting high marks in the 10s, you're probably not going to get funded. So your application has to be perfect. It's not always about the artist with a reputation that gets funding. Sometimes I would say that the panel are looking at an artist with a reputation, and they're looking for reasons not to give it to them because maybe they've been funded many, many years. And then they're looking for reasons for the artist that's never got funding, but their application doesn't measure up to the person who has a reputation. You just don't have the networks in place. You don't have all that stuff that is so central to getting high marks in an application. So there's all these things swirling around the room of the panel. It's amazing any judgments are made with respect to those variables. So it's a process that has its issues, but it's a process that has been formulated to try to balance the process of funding and to make it fair. And my experience of it felt fair. It felt rigorous. The discussions felt rigorous. You get tired and through the process. It's one of those things with art that it's all consuming. Especially if it's not your own work. When you're looking at another person's work and you're trying to enter it. So yeah, I was going to say something else there, but I kind of can't remember what it is. There's something about it. There's some artists out there that make panelists starry-eyed as well. They have a kind of hypnotic quality. They may have been funded successive years, but somehow there's no argument, there's no questioning. They're doing something that is beyond numbers, and they just get all 10s for some reason. And I don't know what that is. That's some kind of magic property. And it could be just something that has been built up over years, kind of these legacy artists that somehow do everything well and do everything good. And artists somehow see something special in the work. And it's not about ideas. It could be just about material. And they're doing something with material that can't be questioned. And they're the artists that will get funded year on year. So they're the facts. Okay, I'm going to leave it there. I hope that was helpful, spilling the beans or whatever it is. And yeah, thank you, and I'll probably be back again sometime soon.